When it was launched, some said it was a master plan that would transform the city centre of Belfast. Tribeca, the £500 million project, was going to regenerate the city's Cathedral Quarter, a 12-acre site between Royal Avenue and the Cathedral Quarter, and the developer, Castlebrook Investments, has properties across that site, some to be renewed, some to be replaced, with an integrated scheme, planning approval eventually given by the council. But from the beginning, it was a controversy. Campaigners wanted historic buildings in the site protected. Some councillors were unimpressed by the name Tribeca, meaning triangle beside the cathedral. A major sticking point seems to be Writers' Square, which is owned by the Communities Department, the open space opposite St Anne's Cathedral. We'll get to that in a moment. Castlebrook Investments pledged that Tribeca would be a catalyst for community. But 8 years since they acquired the portfolio, where is Tribeca? What's happened? In a word, nothing. It's stalled. Castlebrook has told us, and I quote, "Nobody is more frustrated than us at the pace of progress with this scheme." And they declined our invitation to talk today and to talk to you on this programme. They gave us a short statement. I'll bring that to you in a minute. But this is a much bigger story than one company and their ambitions for a particular project. It matters to everybody who cares about the city centre of Belfast. It matters to everybody who cares about the future of this historic Cathedral Quarter, with its heritage buildings there too. 03030 80 55 55 is the number to call. You can text 81771, particularly if you live in that area, work in that area, socialise in that area, care about that area of Belfast. Tell us what you think about this project that has been waiting to be built for many years. We are joined by the SDLP councillor Carl White, who is Deputy Chair of the Planning Committee at Belfast City Council. Anya Grugan, Green Party Belfast councillor and the Deputy Lord Mayor of Belfast. Adam Turkington is here from the Save the Cathedral campaign group, and John Anderson from the Ulster Architectural Heritage. Welcome to all of you. Carl, let me come to you first. Do you anticipate that this will ever be built?
I think that there's no option that we have to see construction taking place at that site, William. I think I was elected first in 2019, and Castlebrook and that area looked the way it does now. The impact of COVID has made it worse, antisocial behaviour, and it's become a 12-acre eyesore in the middle of one of the UK and Ireland's largest city. I remember when the new king was here at St Anne's Cathedral last year with his wife, and they walked out, and I walked out afterwards after that service, and I looked and I just thought, oh my goodness, that's what people have to look at when they come out of this cathedral. You know, it looks like something from post World War II. So we've no option. We have to see it built. We can't allow a project which has been sitting now with planning approval for so long. Prior to that, the acquisition period. But this is going on about 20 years now. You know,
it's been called different things over the years. Royal Exchange, all different kinds of schemes, different kinds of projects. But this current one goes back to 2016.
That's right. And if you look at, I'm 43. I've lived in Belfast most of my life. And if you think back, anyone who's listening, think back 10, 20 years, that bottom part of Royal Avenue around Garfield Street, North Street, you've seen now that there hasn't been anything new in such a long time. And just close your eyes and think of visiting other cities like Manchester or Dublin or Cork, parts of Edinburgh, Glasgow, and the change during that period that has taken place. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, well, why isn't that happening in Belfast?
What's your understanding? Why isn't it happening?
Well, I think it's institutional failure, actually.
Institutional failure?
Yeah, I think there's institutional failure. I think there's a lack of cooperation and coordination between the executive departments and in some ways the council. I think the sums clearly didn't add up as well, or aren't adding up, or they weren't adding up. And obviously then we've had the impact of COVID, but we can't just dismiss what has happened here as all the fault of Castlebrook. I just don't buy that. I think that there are larger issues at play, and I think that's one part of Belfast where we see dereliction and planning blight. There are other parts, William, and one of the big issues we have have in this city is, and in UK and Northern Ireland, is that we don't have, so you think of all the assets that you own. You think of your car, you think of the food you buy every day. You pay tax on your car, you pay tax on your food, you pay tax on your clothes. When you buy a house, you pay tax. You pay rates on buildings, but when you own vacant land, you don't have to pay any tax on it. And there's a big problem in Belfast where there is no incentive for development. Now, Tribeca, there isn't much vacant land, actually, to be fair, but there are other parts of the city. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to take I know we're discussing Tribeca, but there are other problems in Belfast. When you have no tax on vacant land or levy or some way of encouraging development.
Yes.
And I've heard I raised this before, and I was dismissed as a communist, and I did live in Russia when I was younger, so I know a bit about that. But I also spent a lot of time in America, and these types of property taxes are very common. Mm-hmm. So if it works in what is the largest economy in the world to get things kicking off, then it should work here as well.
Let me just bring you this very short statement from Castlebrook Investments, who manage this portfolio. These buildings are theirs. And they say to us, since 2016, Castlebrook has invested £40 million in Belfast city centre through planning and professional fees, community contributions, city marketing and acquisition costs. We've also paid nearly £1 million in rates in that time, with virtually zero revenues. So nobody is more frustrated than us at the pace of progress with this scheme. We very much want to get on with the development and start achieving a return on our investment while delivering the regeneration this historic part of Belfast city centre so needs and deserves. We will continue to work with the council, the Department for Communities and all stakeholders in the city to try and deliver that regeneration and a commercially viable development. That's the end of their statement. Anya, people here will look at other property developments. Think of the Crumlin Road, the courthouse up there, and someone acquired it, big ambitions, and it's dissolved before our eyes. You're seeing it there, it's a wreck. And there are worries, of course there are worries, that with any project, I'm not just talking about this one, that things might go badly wrong. Now, you never supported this particular project from the start, you opposed it from the start. What do you think's going wrong?
There's a lot of things that have gone wrong, and I think first and foremost was the mistaken belief that Castlebrook had ever any intention of developing this land. I think we need to be careful with our language. We keep talking about the regeneration scheme. This is not a regeneration scheme and never was. It was a speculative planning application, and I have had no evidence to suggest it was ever anything but. I have had little evidence that Castlebrook had ever any intention of developing.
Well, we have to take them at their word. We can't stand on what you're saying. They say
we can take
they
them
have plans to do this.
We can take them at their actions. And what we have seen since 2016 is them standing over the continued dereliction of land. They have allowed buildings to go to rot and decay and to further deteriorate. They have a duty as the landowners to protect those buildings. There's a number of listed buildings in their care, and they have let them go into ruin. And I'm sure John will speak to that as well. We think of the number of mysterious fires that have been across that area. It's quite disgraceful. It's not. It's like I said. It's not right to say
Castlebrook are not here. Look, I'm going to ask you just to be very careful with your language, because we're not going to be allowing unfounded allegations to be thrown around. Okay.
What I'm saying is they have a responsibility to the city, they have a responsibility to the buildings, and what we have seen from them is very little in terms of an intention to actually develop this scheme. They had the planning application passed around Garfield Street, and they have just sat on it. They've let that building go to further ruin. That has been passed for years, long before the planning application around 2020.
There was a pandemic.
But that application...
Life stopped for a couple of years.
But they cannot use that as an excuse.
Well, if you have a scheme that was developing, for example, commercial properties, the pandemic changed our very notion of what a city centre commercial property could mean.
100%. And that's why I'm saying that what they put through had never any intention of actually being built, because they had the Garfield Street
Hang on, they didn't
site.
know the pandemic was coming.
Hold on. The Garfield Street site, they've been sat on that. The planning for that was passed years before the site around North Street and the Assembly Buildings in Ryder Square, and they'd made no movements on that. They went ahead with a further outline planning application that everyone told them. There was over 450 objections at the time who told them that planning application was unsustainable. It was already outdated.
And they revised it.
they revised it at a time when we were already telling them this was not what the city needed, and they still pushed ahead with it. This goes back to what I'm saying. It was a speculative planning application in terms and trying to drive up the land value with very little intent of actually developing it. And it doesn't meet the needs of communities. For my regeneration needs to very firmly been bought in by all stakeholders in the city. That includes the city council, that includes residents, that includes businesses, and all the other vibrant cultural and arts organisations that make up that area. They were never included in this scheme. Therefore, it's not a regeneration scheme, and we need to look at things differently.
I will come to Adam Turkington and John Anderson in a second. I just want to bring in Damien Corr, who's the manager of the Cathedral Quarter Business Improvement District, or BID. And that organisation represents just under 700 businesses in or around or linked to that area. Welcome, Damien.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Damien. You sound like you're in Australia with that time delay, I'll tell you. But give us your sense of where we are. We're not very far. There's not been a shovel in the ground here, but where we are in terms of that area and the impact of the lack of work, the lack of building, the lack of transformation for the businesses you represent.
I agree with everything Carl said by and large, and I've heard everything that Anya has said. There's not a week goes by when we don't hear about it. Businesses that we've spoken to and we don't represent, we work on behalf of businesses, professional businesses, professional services, and the arts, lots of arts and cultural organisations. I think it's fair to say the majority of them want the project to go ahead. They would agree with Carl. It's designed, it's got planning permission, it needs to happen. And that would be our position as well. We want to see the sort of catalyst development that the university brought, which has been a game changer for the area. Has brought 15,000 students into the area, built 4 major student blocks with another 2 in the pipeline. Cathedral Quarter is suffering because of the lack of action, but it's not standing still. I mean, we've had 30 new businesses, 30 new entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but you don't have a Tribeca Belfast. Why not? They put up the University of Ulster buildings. What's going on with this?
That's a great example of how it can happen. I don't know, William.
Yeah.
I've heard, like everybody's heard, there's a different rumour every week.
There is.
I've heard that it's the Writers' Square part of it that's holding it up. Apparently
so let's just pause on that, shall we, Damien? Writers' Square is owned by the Communities Department, and there have been rumours. We know all the rumours. People who are informed about this will know that Writers' Square is an issue. Mm-hmm. It's definitely an issue because you've got John, maybe you can comment on it. When you've got an architectural plan like this, and you see the plans, you see the images that are on the website. I'm looking at them right now, and you can see what their ambition for that part of the plan would be. And Writers' Square is problematic for this plan, isn't it?
Well, the developer, justifiably, I suppose, in their terms, wants more square footage. Now, Belfast needs more public open space. All these big development things are totally veiled in secrecy. We have FOIs for the Department of Community say, yes, they are talking about Writers' Square and so on. So what other city in the UK, or indeed in Europe, would restrict the area around its cathedral with yet another obelisk that could be anywhere? Public open space is valuable. Apparently the way these big developers do it is they add up atriums, which are not generally publicly accessible, and balconies. And they offer that as a replacement for Writers' Square. Well, councillors, wake up. They're having you on.
You're saying this kind of design is not a replacement for open spaces, and we're talking about this open public space opposite Belfast City, St Anne's Cathedral.
Yes.
Incidentally, the Communities Department gave us an even shorter statement, but they said the focus of their conversation with Castlebrook has been specifically with regard to how Writers' Square, which is in the ownership of that department, may impact upon Castlebrook's plans for the Tribeca scheme. Now, is that the reason why this hasn't moved any further? Carl, I've also heard rumours that the Assembly Hall building, you think of it, the Harper's Festival, down there, which is in the ownership of Castlebrook, is now on the table as well. I don't know. Castlebrook's not on the programme. We invited them. So we're all speculating. Is it the case that the City Council has had conversations with Castlebrook about the potential of purchasing that Assembly Hall property?
I don't know is the answer, and I can't comment on that, and that's news to me about the council buying more buildings. You know, we barely can empty the bins and clean the streets, and I've just spent 6 weeks on an election campaign where the very important issue of dog fouling, which everybody laughs at, was mentioned.
I don't laugh at it. It's important.
Which mentioned every single day. So I'd be surprised if we were in the market for church halls around Rosemary Street.
No, not a church hall.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the Assembly Hall.
Oh, the Assembly Hall. Yes, sorry, of course.
The very historic Harper's Festival building.
The single most important historical building.
Yeah,
in the city.
Near the Northern Wing.
Yeah, I know.
Just opposite the Northern Wing.
The former where the stock.
Now you see, from a developing point of view, it's an expensive proposition, isn't it? It's an historic building. It's an important building. You can't just do what you want with it. You've got to work within the rules and listing, and that adds cost to what you want to do. Ryder Square, of course. If you could get your hands on that, you could just build, couldn't you? If you get the planning permission, it's a much more beneficial proposition for any developer. I'm not talking about whether this is Castlebrook's plan or not, but just on the paper, which is the cheaper proposition, John? It's obvious, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just following on from what Carl said, the council have bought from their development partner, I gather, the site for Belfast Story, and they've also bought the Tesco Bank. Mm-hmm. Now, I just happened to see...
Council's in the property market these days.
Yeah. I just happened to see in Private Eye. Private Eye asked them what they had paid for those two sites and who they bought them off, and the council refused to tell them. So we're also... There's another reason here, that all this commercial property development, the business plans for Belfast and also for a lot of the rest of the UK are at least 20 years old. They're way out of date. And you can see with the recent thing with Woking District Council, the biggest bankruptcy in UK history of a council, 1.7 billion, and not mentioned in the Northern Ireland press.
Right.
A Northern Ireland developer was the department, Moy Allen Holdings.
But the minute you said Woking, I immediately thought of Pete's Express. Sorry, that's the first thing came into my head. I don't know. Anyway, I'll get the number again. 03030 80 55 55. You can text 81771. Adam, your sense of what's happening, because this should be the creative pulse of the city centre.
I mean, I have so much. I mean, like, I think, firstly, to back up what Anya said, I'm in the Cathedral Quarter all the time. As soon as planning permission was granted for that scheme, they stopped work on Garfield Street. So they had this performative building happening on Garfield Street to say, hey, everybody, look, we're building. And then as soon as they got planning permission, that all stopped. And that site has been untouched now for 2 or 3 years. And it's a real problem. There's a business directly across the road from that. It has to deal with, more than one business actually has to deal with lots of antisocial behaviour. So that's a real problem. And I do think there is some point where we have to say, what are your intentions? Because I know you can make money by just getting planning permission on land that you have banked, and it's my opinion that that's what's happening in the city centre. That's my opinion.
But they've got plans. They've got named architects.
Yes, I know, and they've made money from those.
They've spent 40 million in contributions to this city in that period when they haven't built. And they presumably, if they were here, would say, you know what, Adam, it may be organisations like yours who are slowing down the regeneration.
Well, it's my opinion that, and whatever Carl says about dog filing, you can't say that City Council's biggest job is for dog filing. City Council's biggest job. I know. But you can't say, like, it's not like this is a problem, so therefore this isn't a problem. Mm-hmm. It's the City Council's job to look after our city. And in my opinion,
actually, it's the Department for Communities have regeneration powers, and if we're going to,
well, there's multiple people who have
got planning powers.
Yeah, I'm not trying to defend anything here, but I think we need to get the facts right about who's in charge of what. The Department for... You asked me a question there, William, which I didn't get to answer.
Please do.
Yes, the Department for Communities, they've sat in a development brief for Ryder Square following this application for over 2 years and not done anything about it. Regeneration powers in Belfast are controlled by the Department for Communities. That was a mistake during the RPA. Regeneration powers should have been transferred to councils. I was thinking about it today. It's almost like, imagine a school where you employ the teacher, but you don't employ anybody else. Mm-hmm. And so we're in a position where we're in charge of planning, but we're not in charge of regeneration. Now, if we were in charge of regeneration, we wouldn't have sat on a development brief for 2.5 years while nothing happened.
You're blaming the communities department, are you?
There's a responsibility. What I said was there's institutional failure. I'm not here to point fingers at one person or another person. I think there's a collective failure.
I get that. Well, you just
Sure, and
your point, Adam, we have and we do talk about Belfast architectural heritage all the time.
Yeah.
How to protect these buildings. There's enforcement powers in the council. If they're breached, their investigations and those processes go underway. But I just want to make the point. Rates went up last year by 8%. If I was on a different show here, hearing from businesses and retailers about businesses, they would be complaining about what they're already paying. So the idea that the council has, and there's another argument as well, Adam, about maybe council should look at borrowing money. You're talking about Woking, that's a bad example. The council doesn't borrow any money.
Yeah.
It takes its money in every year and it spends it, which to me is a very antiquated way of financing. There's no reason why we couldn't borrow.
So we have a situation at the minute where one venture capitalist organisation holds a massive section of our city centre, and it is
12 acres or more, 12 to 14
exactly.
acres.
And there has to be a legislative answer to that, whether that's in the case of a dereliction tax, whether that's in the case of you pay 20% on when you rebuild an old building, you don't pay any tax sometimes when you're building a new build. There are lots and lots of things that are set up in the way of retaining buildings.
Yes, but before you get all sort of Marxist about it, Adam, I mean, a lot of these venture capitalists and developer companies are doing jobs that the city council couldn't afford to do and hasn't done.
But neither have they. And I think that's
exactly.
the point.
I'm not talking about this one project. I mean, generally.
Well, have you been to Liverpool recently?
Sure, yeah.
So if you go to Liverpool, you have this one big development called Liverpool One, right? And what has happened, they actually got their Tribeca, right? And what that did was it sucked all, it worked for the people who built it because it took all the businesses and they all went to this one area and the rest of the city is completely dead, and we have 20% dereliction, vacant units in the city centre right now. We don't need more shops. If you build more shops in the Tribeca footprint, then you will get more vacancy throughout the rest of the Belfast area. It's mad.
Complicated though, Adam. You've got to give people a reason to walk through that area.
I understand that, but the point is that, and I don't want to sound like I'm going to sound like a Marxist. There is literally no way that there's no way that capitalism on its own fixes this problem.
Right.
Because it's not Castlebrook's fault. Their job is to make money.
Sure.
But it's also city council and the legislator's job to sit in the way of naked capitalism and say, I'm sorry, that's bad for our city.
It's the partnership with the investment on you, isn't it? It's the partnership with that and the ambitions of the local community and the business and the creative community there.
I think the big problem for me, why it didn't work in the first place, and it's not going to work unless there's a radical change in direction, is that people have been left out of this. We often forget that the development rights, while us and the planning committee are the guardians of those, they belong to the people of Belfast.
We had a consultation.
And we'll be here all day if we start talking about that. So we will. But I think, and John made a good point as well about the cloud of secrecy. Ryder Square is a public space. People of Belfast have a genuine interest in our built heritage. It's something that we have let go to rack and ruin across the city, and we need to be doing much more to protect it. And I think the council have made some interventions in the past, like the 2 Royal Avenue, which I think has been a fantastic intervention that we have made to save that building and bring it back into community use.
So after this,
arguments for that.
But to be fair, they're not here. But I'm on their website. I wish they were here. If you really do believe this is about the people of Belfast and investing in it, put someone on the programme to talk to us. We'll treat you respectfully. We hope to have a proper conversation. But on the website, they say, having listened to the feedback and the responses that you're both talking about, they have made amendments to their plans. We know they had revised plans in 2018 that the council signed off on, reimagining the North Street Arcade with spaces designed for independent retailers. Grade A offices located on the corner of Rosemary Street and North Street has now been reduced to 10 stories. There were significantly more than that. The 27-storey tower on Rosemary Street has now been reduced to 10 stories. Additional heritage building fabric retained, more public spaces in the form of a new Assembly Square, the pedestrianisation of North Street, a reimagined and improved Writers Square adjacent to Donegal Street, which remains open to traffic. That's a relocation. That's a relocation, isn't it?
That is
Where is
one
it?
way of putting it, but I think...
William, can I come in?
Please do. Go ahead, Damien. Sorry, I'd forgotten you were there. Damien, you're down the line.
William.
Go ahead.
And that's what the vast majority of businesses in Cathedral Quarter want to see. Yes, there's frustration it's not happened, but let's focus on how we can make it happen. Yeah. Maybe that development brief, it would be good if we could get some work done on that. It has taken too long, but it's the only show in town. Mm-hmm. It'll create that catalyst effect that the university has already done. And and I'm not an apologist for Castlebrooke or anybody, but in fairness to them, to address Adam's point, they said their design, not only would it not drag footfall away from elsewhere, but if you look at it carefully, there's some nice links there into Castle Court and Victoria Square, and the opening of the Old North Street Arcade again creates that connectivity that modern cities depend on, and that everybody will get a benefit from.
Yeah, as it stands right now, you've got a lot of streets there that are just blocks of buildings. And I guess the connectivity you're speaking about there, Damien, is the opportunity to walk through those spaces, to amble your way through, which is an open spatial experience, John, isn't it? And you see it in lots of places around these islands. But in that area, you've got a series of buildings that just block your way.
Can I just make a point about Ryder Square and this idea, the development brief is what holding this up. The idea that a public open space, an area that is the civic heart of the city, it's the place where so much artist and cultural expression happens, it's where all protests start, it's the heart of the city in terms of its civic voice. The fact that that could be subject to development, to me, I am fundamentally opposed to. And the idea that an entire 12-acre scheme is dependent on that square, which is not massive, to me, I am not buying it. And I know there was a statement from Castlebrooke last summer, basically blaming the Writers' Square.
What is so sacred about Writers' Square? The small piece of land which could be relocated across the road and still be a square.
Well, if anyone was nerdy enough, wanted to go back and listen to my examination of the numbers around public open space at the time of the planning application, they could see there was, in my view, a bit of a fudge around the numbers in terms of open space, and particularly in terms of planning policy, particularly when you come to overshadowing. They were using space inside residential blocks that were entirely overshadowed as compensatory for the loss of Ryder Square. That's nonsense. The numbers just did not add up to me. And to take away space where we have so little public open space as it is, never mind one that is so integral to the cultural being of this city, to me is absolutely unconscionable. And the fact to try to say that is integral to this scheme being developed, to me, is just nonsense.
Well, it's not nonsense. It's a fact, and you can't unring it. Well, it's one of the reasons, Anya, and we all know that's one of the reasons. I'm sorry, Ryder Square is important in Belfast. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
How old is it?
I think, is it 25 years?
25 years old.
Yeah, I can't stand.
You're talking about it like it was built in 1798.
Exactly. It's not Donegal. And can I just say, there's a square on the other side of St Anne's called Cathedral Gardens. Let's just cast our mind back to pre-COVID. That's somewhere you would have taken your children. I took my children. I stopped during COVID. The antisocial behaviour, the park, it is not a place that families go. Ryder Square now, to me, feels abandoned. It doesn't feel like this civic oasis. Yes, it has an important role and an important legacy. But to say that it's,
So we should just hand it to a private developer to build on it?
Well, Anya, you've said a lot in this discussion that, frankly, no, I didn't say that. So I don't know why you're...
I'm asking the question.
Well, you're not here to ask the questions. I think that's William's job, to be fair. Goodness. I'm just making the point.
Now, come on, you can all ask questions.
Yeah, I know. I'm being facetious. I'm just making the point that...
You got a facetious out of him.
Yeah, I'm just making the point that, we are where we are with this, and we've voted against it as well for lots of the reasons that Anya has outlined. But, we've had enough of this now. We've 25,000 students beside us in Ulster. We've got our own Belfast stories.
Get your finger out.
So why can't they build part of it?
Just not sure whose finger we're talking about.
Why can't they build part of it?
I'm getting shouted at in my ear. Johnny Caldwell's going to get very annoyed because I keep talking to you guys without talking to the callers who are lining up. Let's go to them now. We'll go to Noah first of all, who's in Belfast. Hi, Noah.
Hi.
Noah, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the whole thing with Tribeca is that at this point it is just too long down the line. Like, they've spent £40 million, so they must have the money to do something else to do something with the properties that they have, if they have the money to spend £40 million out of pocket on.
Well, it's a £500 million project
of other people's money.
Yeah. Well, yes, but the fact that they have enough money to be paying that off. So if they don't have the money, then where are they going to get the money from? Something needs to be investigated there, in my personal opinion.
That's investments. That you put some money in, you get some money back. And if you're a successful company, you get more money back than you put in. That's just how capitalism works, isn't it? 03030 80 55 55. Noah, thank you very much. Good question. John is there too, also in Belfast. Hello, John.
How you doing? This is such... it's a disgrace. I mean, as I see it, this is rapacious developers. They are land banking it, and that is now a black hole which is sucking the life of the city centre. You can see it. It's a disgrace. Where I did a book 20 years ago, and it was full of the regeneration and hopefulness, and here we go. And part of that was covering the Cathedral Quarter. I walk around now and I'm looking, and I'm seeing buildings that have no further development just because they are being banked. This is we own that. We should be owning that. I think that it should be vested and bought back and taken and brought back into public ownership and do away with these boys because they don't care about.
But John, these developers tell us they want to build this project. There are things in the way that they cannot get past to get this project done. They've brought in revisions to their plans. They have listened to people. They've reduced a tower from 27 stories to 10. They've done all kinds of changes here.
But I think part of the problem is that folks probably see them as disingenuous. Because those plans gets changed. They move them in. Oh, we'll change it. We'll change it. We'll change. How many revisions has that whole project had? There's a whole thing about
it's 20 years long. This is the 20th anniversary of the first attempt to do something there.
It's a disgrace because I mean the last one was the same we'll do, and it's back to Writers Square.
Yeah.
It was going to cast such a long shadow. When you look at the illustration, we're going to do this. We spent this, and aren't we great? But actually, the illustration, the lighting was all wrong. They're just disingenuous. Yes, they're genuine about wanting to make money, but at what cost to us? The city is on its arse. Pardon my language. It's not right. The city centre. We need to pedestrianise the city centre. I think that's a key thing to do as well. Increase the infrastructure for cycling. Get people out and about. Bring them to a place that they want to come to. People walk up and down there and you see them. They're like lost souls. Yeah. These tourists are looking around going, what the hell? I've paid how much to come here? And they're charging me how much for a pint?
Well said.
Why don't we call the developer's bluff and issue the development brief and either rule it in or rule it out and get it over and done with? And I don't think we're on our backside.
So what does that mean?
Like I said, there's three new hotels being built in Cathedral Quarter. We've had over 30 new businesses, small to medium enterprises setting up in the last 2 years. That means the area is attractive to them. The university is a game changer as to how the Cathedral Quarter looks. I'm sitting here looking out at Hill Street. There are tours up and down that street every day. We have 170 cruise ships.
Let's not make Ulster University's new site sound like Florence here. When you leave one of these hotels, what do you do? Where do you go? Where do you walk? What do you see?
There's loads to do in Belfast. It's completely different city than it was 20 years ago. I run a business that runs out of the area, and I'm really happy with most of what goes on there. Although I still have, I do have my problems with some things, as everyone will know. But for me, the biggest problem here is that these guys have bit off more than they can chew. I think it's completely mental to think that something that's a central, the oldest, most historical part of our city gets basically got bought up in a fire sale because the previous owners went out of business. How is it that we're now left in this position with so much?
Am I right, Adam, in saying you've basically got a package, 14 acres, package of land and buildings and planning rights?
Yeah.
That's basically that's worth a lot of money.
And Adam's right, and I think Damien's point there about calling the bluff, I think it is up to the department, and let's agree, let's not make that the sort of sticking point. Get that out.
Why can't we have a deadline?
You could.
Don't you renew planning permission?
The point is on
when's the planning permission up for renewal?
Well, planning permission you have
every 5 years, right?
5 years, depending.
So they've got another year or so.
Well, I think
they got this in 2018, right?
But the planning is now cemented in.
Yeah,
and they did that. because they took the roof off the Garfield building and said, this is us starting work.
That's it.
And that cements in the planning application.
Yeah. Incidentally, look, if Castlebrook is listening, or people from Castlebrook are listening, and you're thinking, we're taking a lot of incoming here, you could have put someone on the programme. That is the point of a live conversation, so that we can hear your side. From time to time, I try to anticipate what you might say, and I'm throwing those points in. I realise you're getting a bit of a drubbing, guys. Because people are as frustrated as you have described your own frustrations earlier, right? And that's why you're getting a bit. People are unhappy. This has been sitting there for 20 years. It's fallen to pieces. It's looking unseemly. And the ambition that people can bring to this area is there. Mm-hmm. People want it to change.
And there's a broader conversation to be had about what are our city centres for? Yeah. Are they there to make money for people who, frankly, don't live here and don't turn up on radio shows? I mean, but
again, Karl Marx is back with us.
Yeah, okay. I'm being facetious.
They're partly about business.
Listen,
they're partly about business.
If you go into any conversation now about city planning, everybody says it's not about retail just anymore. It's not about offices anymore. It's about housing. It's about public space. It's about arts and creativity. It's about like a mishmash of all these little things that make vibrant cities. I mean, people have like referenced other like really vibey cities that are here. They don't just build, like, they don't just knock down their most important built heritage and build like marble and glass.
But there's, can I make a quick point there, Adam? You're right. And just back to this point about institutional failure. So let's accept that Castlebrook is a big problem that needs, a big solution. At the very low level, okay, Anya's colleague, Malachy O'Hara, when he was a councillor, called for the pedestrianisation of Union Street, which has been delivered in a way. I called for the pedestrianisation of Hill Street in 2020, William, and I got a letter a month ago saying, actually, now I met them last July, they showed me a document which looked like a consultation, and I got a letter a month ago telling me, sorry, we've no staff to do this. Now, the Department for Infrastructure have 2,000 staff. So you mean to tell me that during COVID, where basically the city of Cork was completely pedestrianised, it's a different place. Mm-hmm. All we did was Union Street and with Hill Street with taxis driving up and down it. That's what I mean. There's officials sitting listening to this show and their media advisors in the Department for Communities and Department for Infrastructures, and they need to get the finger out as well, because there isn't enough being done. Let me just read a couple of interesting texts here. Ronan in Jordanstown. William, this regeneration scheme you're talking about, whoever is policing the development brief, they're not doing their job. Get it sorted. Unnamed text, the Assembly Rooms at the bottom of Lord Donegal Street, that's the Harper Festival building, right? Yeah. Is one of the oldest historic buildings of Belfast. I presume it forms part of the Tribeca plan as it sits within the Cathedral Quarter. Yes, they own that building. It's an absolute disgrace that it's being allowed to decay. Like many other historic buildings in this area, these developers are intent on letting the area decay further in an effort to eventually demolish everything and sell the land. Well, we don't know what their intentions are. I'm sure they would challenge you on that. But we have seen this kind of decay in other historic buildings, and that is the fear. When you've got historic buildings, you have a time limit in terms of protecting those buildings. The Exchange and Assembly Rooms was where Thomas McCabe, the local businessman, United Irishman and passionate anti-slaver, challenged Waddell Cunningham in 1786, this text says, in an action that resulted in slavery not coming to Belfast in the way Cunningham and his cohort wanted. Historically important, not just architecturally important. People want to protect this. They want to do something. Now, question is, will we be here in 8 years' time talking about anything changing? Because others are saying, can't you change the law? Can't you bring in some council policy? Can't you remove some permission to make this happen? Yeah, you could put a vacant land levy in. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? It means, as I said at the beginning, when you is that the council or the assembly? That'll be assembly. It needs legislation. Assembly first. Yeah, well, we need an assembly to do that. We also need government departments who can do jobs, as they're showing with their education cuts and different things. They're able to make decisions. Do you regret supporting this scheme now, 2016, 2018? No, we voted against it in the plan. You personally? I don't support it. You can't unring a bell. Like, the planning application is passed. We're sitting in 12 acres of dereliction. You've the King of England walking out of St Anne's Cathedral looking at what looks like a dump. So we need to get our act together. I've never heard the SDLP more concerned about. No, it's just an example. I'm just thinking, if it was the President of Ireland, it doesn't matter who it is. It just, for me, it was you're thinking this place looks terrible. Oh, yeah.
The point, planning is passed. It is. Yeah. But we need to be honest. I said at the time, it's never going to be built under that scheme. And I stand by that. It's entirely outdated. Adam said that in terms of, our city centres are completely changed, and this was based on an outdated business model. Everybody told them at the time. There was over 400 objections that said that. What we need is an absolutely different approach. And I agree with Carl, we absolutely need to start looking at measures in terms of tackling dereliction and land banking. I think that's something we really do need to step into. But we also need to actually, as we've said a few times, this is far too big for Castlebrooke. I've looked into Castlebrooke. I've never seen anything they've developed, and I've no confidence they're going to develop this either. And I've seen nothing to date that suggests that they're willing to do so. It's about speculation. What we do need is an actual regeneration scheme for this area where everybody is around the table and buying in. That's why, for me, that's fundamentally why it has failed to date, because the entire community is not bought into it, and are not contributing to it.
And again, as I pointed out earlier,
viable.
Castlebrook have plans. They have named architects.
I can say I have
They
plans.
went
It doesn't mean
through
they
the plan. They went through the planning system. So you can't say that they have no plans when they have literally
speculation.
got plans.
Speculative planning permission, we know is a thing. It's about increasing land value. And for my fear is if we issue a development brief, again, they're going to bank that as well, and it's going to increase the value of the site for them to flip it on to somebody else. And then we're back in the cycle of new planning permission, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We need to stop waiting around for private developers to save us.
And somebody here texting, just simple this, use it or lose it. Put a time limit on it.
I mean, somebody talked about the consultations that were had earlier, and I went to those consultations, right? And I was told that this is the only commercially viable thing that can be done with this land, right? Now, that's the only language that is understood here. So what we need to do is we need to make it commercially unviable for them to continue to have dereliction, and commercially unviable for them to continue to hold
delay fees of one form or another.
Dereliction taxes, all this kind of stuff.
Dereliction taxes.
Or whatever you want to call it.
Orwellian, isn't it? He's gone from Marx to Orwell, John. This has got to be the final comment. Over to you.
Councils and departments are mesmerised by these guys.
Yeah.
They come on, they show the CAD images of shiny, happy people in a place that could be anywhere. Mm-hmm. These people character assassinate Belfast and other towns. There are lots of good buildings in there, small-scale buildings, which small-scale developers could develop to great advantage. And there are good examples around the city. Merchant Hotel, Wilton House beside our offices, the Printworks former warehouse in College Street. All those are effectively one-man band operations, spending a lot of money in their terms, and they will be successful. The build it and pilot high merchants who, as I say, mesmerise councils. And council planning committees, they need to get their act together. Well, they need to realise that Belfast is Belfast.
You've got two of them in the studio with you. You've got the Deputy Lord Mayor sitting over there.
Exactly.
There's the Deputy Head of the Planning Committee.
And I greatly admire
let rip, John.
You made the other day publicly about developers.
Thank you.
So the other thing about
it's easy to say that, with respect.
Of course. Well, it's always not me, mate. It's always not me, mate.
I'm taking responsibility. I'm not Castlebrooke. I am involved in the planning committee. So is Anya. Have been for this is my third year. We started the conversation by saying there's institutional failure. If your position is that it's just the planning committee, that's just not true.
No, that's a big component of it.
Well, it's part of it, but
Belfast Planning Committee is passing.
Carl says you need the regeneration dimension and all the dimensions. One thing you could probably say is they're all politicians, John. There are all politicians involved.
No, your planning committee is passing big developments when Belfast has no sewage provision. And you keep doing that. Why do you do that?
Let me get into
so that these guys can increase their land value.
I'm not even trying to answer that question, but John, thank you very much. John Anderson, Adam Turkington, Deputy Lord Mayor Anya Grugan, and Councillor Carl White. And can I just say, when Castlebrook is willing to put someone on the programme, you don't even have to have a guess. I'll just talk to you by myself. Put someone on the programme. This matters to us. This matters to this city. It's the capital city of Northern Ireland, right? It matters. Put someone on the programme. Talk to us, because you're getting some pretty negative feedback in various places, guys. And part of that is because you're not communicating. Let's just say that. Communicate your way through this. Thank you very much.